We are 3 days into the ATP Finals. Day 3 was awesome. And I think there's enough here where we can kind of do a brief overview of what we've seen so far, especially getting into the Alcaraz-Fritz match, in which I'll go into some detail. Musetti de Minaur was an unbelievable spectacle. And I'll hit on some other matches a little bit more quickly. Not going to call this a Monday match analysis because it's going to be a bit more casual in terms of what we're doing. But let's start with Fritz Alcaraz. Huge win for Carlos. Finishing number one is probably the biggest storyline coming into this year-end championships. The race between Alcaraz and Sinner to do so, other than who's going to win the event itself. And one way that Alcaraz can do that is by going 3-0 in the group stage. And this was always going to be the match against Fritz, that would prove to be the most challenging, especially given how well Taylor has played in Turin the last couple years. It's very clear he likes these conditions. For Alcaraz to get through this one with a win, it now puts him in a great position to face a Lorenzo Musetti, who might be tired, who Alcaraz has beaten 5 times in a row, for a chance to lock up that year-end number one. So we'll put a pin in that, but I just want to say that was a significant part of what Carlos Alcaraz did out there today. Other than that, I think Fritz, especially the way he was playing, and I think the newfound clarity that he's had against Alcaraz to really just try to rush him and suffocate him relentlessly, I felt like Fritz probably did the best Jannik Sinner impersonation that anybody can do in the field. Obviously, he can't fully do it, otherwise he'd be Jannik Sinner. But a lot of the stuff that Taylor does, I think, is a good sort of simulation of what Sinner does. Not necessarily the movement and defense and that aspect of it, but like if you look at the backhand speed that Fritz was bringing to the table, for example, in set 1, that was like Jannik Sinner backhand speed. That was like 75 mile per hour averages. Then, of course, you have a great clash between elite hold and elite return. Fritz, second most prolific serve holder on the tour this year. Alcaraz, best serve breaker on the tour this year. So that was always going to be fun to watch play out. And what ended up happening was, first of all, stellar match. Outstanding level. I was impressed with both players here. But it was a tale of two halves, which is a cliche that you usually hear in team sports or sports with halves or quarters, not normally tennis. But this was very much one of those tennis matches where there was kind of phase 1 and phase 2, and you kind of had a flip in the dynamic of the match. And there were a couple of Alcaraz adjustments that led to that dynamic changing. And that's the first thing I'll highlight here. So second serve return position is what we're going to start with. Now, first serve return was also altered by Carlos. I haven't looked into that as heavily, but certainly Alcaraz moved back on both the first and the second serve. But the second serve is particularly interesting because it's something that Taylor had talked about after his first round match. And he explained in press that when a player stands very deep, he's not worried about an aggressive return. He's not worried about getting rushed on the +1. So why take any risk? Why not just roll it in soft? Just lay it in there. When a player is standing up, now he sees a threat where if I don't hit a good second serve, if I hit a soft second serve, I might get hurt. And also an opportunity. If I hit a big second serve, I might be able to rush them on the return. Because that's another aspect of it, right? If they're deep, it doesn't matter if I hit a big second serve relatively, because they're not going to be bothered by it. So that's the Fritz logic. Makes a lot of sense. And honestly, for a few years now, I think it's been like, this isn't some well-kept secret. It's been very clear that Fritz We'll hit a big second serve if you stand in, and we'll hit a soft second serve if you stand back. Now, as everybody knows, I've said this many times, I love listening to Taylor Fritz talk the game. I think he's one of the best minds in tennis. I don't think that means that everything he says is beyond examination and that it's just like, all right, cool. He's got it. This is great. Nothing to see here. No, like there are some interesting aspects to look at here. First of all, Jim Courier had some interesting data. Well, where should I start? Yeah, let's start with this. Jim Courier had some interesting data, which is that when Fritz hits his second serve above 95 miles per hour, he wins 55% of the points. And when he hits it below 95 miles per hour, he wins 52% of the points. And over the course of, I don't know if that was a 52-week stat or if that was a career-long stat. However you slice it, sample size, thousands and thousands of points, 3% actually massive. So, okay, that's interesting. Second part of this, Djokovic at the U.S. Open is the first thing I thought of. Novak, when he played Fritz in the U.S. Open quarterfinal this year, waited until the biggest points of the match and then went way back, right? So Novak, the entire, like for any regular second serve point, stood up. Every time it was a big point, back. And that means that in Novak Djokovic's opinion, right? Novak Djokovic's opinion, Fritz's play to hit the soft second serve when you are deep is an advantageous play for him as a returner, right? He manipulated it in a way where he wanted Taylor to do that on the big points. Fritz actually double faulted anyway, trying to hit that kind of low risk, so to speak, second serve. And there was also one double fault in the third set in a pretty big spot in this match against Alcaraz on one of those low risk roll it in second serves. So I think, I'm not saying Taylor's like wrong because the logic is fully there. I'm just saying, you know, you can look at it and have an interesting discussion. And by the way, like based on, I don't want to misspeak here, to be honest, but based on Paul Anacone's comments on Tennis Channel, I think Paul at least believes that against Alcaraz, there are some dangerous aspects to that approach if you're Taylor Fritz. Now, let's dig into that a little bit deeper, because the big idea in this matchup is that Fritz has to be offensive, that he has to get in attack probably right away if he wants to win points consistently. And when he's hitting soft second serves against a deep Alcaraz, it really doesn't contribute to the mission. Does not contribute to the mission of getting on top of the point. It is accepting neutrality, which on a second serve is usually okay, right? So against a regular opponent, if I can start a second serve point at neutral, all right, I'll take it. Hope to win around 50% of the points, maybe a little bit higher. That's totally fine, right? Against Alcaraz, maybe neutrality is not an ambitious enough goal. And maybe it's worth trying to up the quality on the second serve a little bit, even with Alcaraz deep. Maybe. Now, the win rate from both positions was 56% for Alcaraz on return. So in the first set, Carlos was in the whole time. He took every second serve return inside the baseline. And then in sets 2 and sets 3, he went back. He went back deep. And he stayed there. He did not deviate. So once again, we can kind of go off of what the decision was by the Taylor Fritz opponent to give us a clue in what was more comfortable for them, right? And Alcaraz went about 13 feet back for the rest of the match. That's 4 meters for those who prefer metric. I just want to also note that because I don't have time to dig into this any deeper, but the return quality for Alcaraz for the match was a 9.4. And I'm kind of blown away by that. He's facing an elite server. Like Fritz's serve quality was 9.1. So he's facing an elite server in quick conditions. And somehow Carlos on the Tennis Insights kind of composite score, which I don't love to use all that often because I think it's a little bit shortcutty and I'd rather dig into what the reasons are for that number being the number. But I think that tells you a lot that it's 9.4. And if we can just, I'm going to look at set 1. In set 1, it was an 8.4. So that tells you that when Alcaraz moved back, return quality increased. If I can just add one more thing on this, Carlos is liberated in a way that most players are not liberated to move back on return because he has such incredible recovery speed with his feet. Fritz did a great job, especially on the deuce side. When Alcaraz was back on the first serve, man, Taylor was just hitting that short angle out wide, dragging Alcaraz way off the court, had an ocean of court to hit into on the +1. And the only thing that saved Alcaraz on some occasions, I still think Fritz had a pretty good conversion rate on the deuce side, hitting that wide serve. But the only thing that was going to save Alcaraz was that foot speed to recover back into the court. And that's the case even on second serves. And it's not just lateral movement, right? I know I'm painting the picture of sort of a lateral issue of being dragged off the court, but it's also into out movement. Like the way Carlos, what he'll do is he'll hit like a good strong neutral return on a second serve, let's say, from 14 feet behind the baseline. His ability to get up for the next ball, which he generally has, he generally has time. He's made a strong enough return where he's earned some time and he's moving forward into the next shot. It just, the eye test visually, it looked like the fourth shots that Carlos was getting were pretty favorable fourth shots from that deep return position. Part of that is quality of return. Part of that is that Fritz kind of just spins it in if you stand deep. And part of that is just how well Alcaraz then moves up into the court to attack that fourth shot of the rally. When I say fourth shot, remember serve, return, +1, fourth shot, right? Okay. The second adjustment that Alcaraz made is he had to win a battle against his own serve. And what I mean by that is he struggled with his serve. This was not a day where Carlos's serve was his friend. He had to fight it. Alcaraz's first serve was going to be really important for him to turn this match around so that he could start more points on offense. Fritz was doing such a good job when given those second serve looks to actually jump on Alcaraz and get into the positions where he can be a winning player against the world number 2. Okay, first set, Carlos made 58% first serves in. Not good. He's usually around 64%. So he was down. But his speed was up. His speed was up 5 miles per hour, up to 126. It's usually 121. And what was Fritz doing on the second serve? He was doing what Mike Russell and Paul Annacone certainly emphasized and stressed before the match, which is, dude, aggressive on that second return. Neutral is not good enough. Neutral is failure. Flat out, it's failure on the second return. That's how Fritz was playing it. Taylor's in attack percentage in the first set was 38%. It's one of the highest numbers I've ever seen. Tour average is 24%. Fritz's player average is 28%. Fritz was 10 percentage points higher than that. In the second set, it was clear that Carlos was going to need to serve a little bit better. And he did. He got that percentage up to 67%, but his speed was back down to his regular speed of 121. You heard Juan Carlos Ferrero say ritmo at one point. I think he was saying, let's get a rhythm on the serve, read between the lines, that is, take a little bit off and let's make some. Were Alcaraz's serves particularly effective in the second set? Not always. Fritz hit a lot of good neutralizing returns actually throughout the set, but at least it wasn't as bad as the first set when his second serve was getting blitzed. Fritz's in-attack number, still very good, but down to 32%. Let's go to set 3. Ritmo has been achieved. 72% first serves in, and the speed was back up to 125. So in the third set, finally clicked, and Carlos put percentage and damage together. Fritz's in attack in the third set, now we're all the way back down to earth, 25%. So the in attack, just to summarize, it went from 38 to 32 to 25. Those were the two Alcaraz shifts in my mind: return position and serve quality. Now I want to kind of go through the match and how it played out. Fritz was very close here. First set tiebreak. The mini break was impressive by Fritz. I want to give him some props, the first mini break, because he got a first serve return into Alcaraz's backhand. So right there, you've got a victory. Carlos hit a drop shot off that first ball. Taylor gets up to it and keeps his drive grip. Now, I recently did a breakdown of Alcaraz versus Ruud, and I talked about how when a player gets up to a low short ball with the drive grip, they usually go cross court. And Alcaraz sees that and usually will then anticipate cross court. Well, Fritz went against the grain here, and he went down the line, catching Alcaraz off guard and putting away an easy one. Other than that, Alcaraz missed a bunch of first serves, and as a result, did not really find himself in favorable positions to hit attacking forehands behind his serve. Instead, he was forced to hit a lot of backhands, and his backhand, he made 2 or 3 unforced errors. Might have been 3 total errors, 2 unforced, something like that. Just missed a lot of backhands in this tiebreak, which was odd because Alcaraz's backhand was really good throughout the set, and it was good for the most part in the match. It just had a rough patch here in this tiebreak. Quality was really high, though, and it was, I thought it was a perfect set pretty much by Taylor Fritz. And in the second set, Fritz continued to be all over Alcaraz, applying most of the pressure. At 2-all, Carlos is serving. They play an 8-deuce game. And within this 8-deuce game, Fritz has an overhead on a break point, one of 2 break points. Alcaraz hit a great first serve on the other break point. This is another Alcaraz drop shot. And this time Fritz, with his slice grip, hits a great chip down the line. Very well located. Almost always, Carlos, if the ball actually bounces in front of him behind a drop shot, his next shot's going to be a lob. And it's pretty much impossible to defend against if Carlos hits a great lob. I didn't think this was a great lob, but the one area, and so often it just feels like Fritz has this one moment in a tight match against Alcaraz where you're like, this is the point where maybe if he just played it better. And same thing against Sinner in a couple of these matches like the year-end championship final last year. This is the one point where if he just played it a little bit better, then it could have changed the outcome. And this was the point. Carlos deserves credit, certainly, for turning this point around, but Fritz let an overhead bounce that I don't think he should have. Yeah, as soon as he let this ball bounce, he had lost control of the point, hitting a bounce overhead because the ball just traveled too deep on him. So then at that point, he was behind the baseline, weight moving backwards, wasn't really going to be able to finish an overhead from letting it bounce. But had he taken it out of the air, and I don't think it was too high to take out of the air, and the trajectory was not, you can tell that it wasn't too high because of how much the ball carried towards the back of the court. If somebody hits a ball, like, you want to let an overhead bounce. If somebody hits the ball 1,000,000 feet up in the air and it's coming straight down at crazy speeds, and you also know at that point that your opponent has recovered to the middle, it's not going to make a difference. That's where this is a terrible ball to take out of the air because it's dropping so fast straight down. This wasn't one of these lobs, and I just thought that this was the moment where Fritz lost control of the point, and Alcaraz ended up finishing on his own terms with an approach shot forehand and a volley put away. Then you had 4-all deuce on Alcaraz's serve again. And Fritz had a second serve. 4-all deuce second serve. Hit a great backhand inside-out return. And he had a sitter forehand inside the service box, right on top of the net. Hit it inside in right at Carlos, who was waiting for it, and passed on with a forehand cross court. I was really surprised here. Like, I was really surprised that Fritz didn't see him. He didn't see Carlos. I thought that this was a slow enough and weak enough ball that there could have been a little bit more peripheral awareness here. But there wasn't. And Alcaraz did well to handle the ball that came in with considerable speed to execute the pass. Then on the next point, now this was add in, so arguably Alcaraz was still in control of the game, but Fritz had an easy backhand volley, and he hit it right at Alcaraz, and Carlos made the pass to force an error. This should have been game extended right back to deuce here at 4-all, as Fritz tried to break and ultimately potentially serve for the match. If he broke, he would have served for the match. 3 forecourt points, right? 3 points where Fritz ended up at the net, many of them Alcaraz dragging him forward. Well, statistically, that was a big deal in this match. Fritz was 18 for 30 at the net, so that's 60% points won, which is not awesome. A lot of big points. Alcaraz turned it around by breaking out into a love 40 advantage at 5-6 in the second. Fritz missed a routine +1 forehand on the first point of this game. Alcaraz got lucky with a net cord on the second point. Now it's 5-6 love 30. Taylor's missed a lot of chances. You're just like, ooh, kind of feel how this is going at this point. Love 30, Alcaraz mixes up the backhand with a slice and gets Fritz to pull a backhand trade cross-court wide into the alley. Love 40, Fritz wins that point, 15-40. Fritz approaches with a backhand down the line, and Alcaraz is there in time, on balance, rips a forehand cross-court passing shot. Another net point lost for Taylor. This one, I suppose I didn't mind as much. It's the right play. Just wasn't quite good enough on the approach. It was another love 40 at 2-3 in the third. And it was another slow +1 forehand, meaning the return came in slow and Fritz missed a +1 forehand to start the game and go down love 15. Then double faulted at love 15. At love 30, Alcaraz with the deep second return position hit a nice deep return, and Fritz missed a first backhand long. So even though Carlos was standing 13 feet back, he was still able to draw an error off of a strong second serve return. Fritz won the love 40 point, but at 15-40, Alcaraz did exactly what we were talking about in terms of attacking the fourth shot. It was a backhand return, hard, inside in, from the deuce side, and then on the next ball, he got up onto the baseline, and on the fourth shot, hit a backhand cross-court hard to force an error. Those were the two breaks, and that was that. Obviously, along with the other, big picture changes that Alcaraz was able to make. For Fritz, though, I thought it was a perfect game plan, and I thought more than anything, if you're regretful, it was an imperfect forehand day. And I think for Taylor to beat Alcaraz, you kind of need three things going. You need a perfect game plan, you need good conditions, and you need a great forehand day. Great serving day, sure, but Taylor's serve, I rarely watch a Fritz match and feel like his serve is bad. It's very rare. The forehand, to me, there's more variance. There are, great days, good days, okay days. This was definitely an okay day. Taylor, though, did really well to kind of, as I mentioned, remedy some of the mistakes that he made in Tokyo, getting passive on big second serve returns. There was a huge intent to do damage on the return. I don't really think Taylor was ever guilty of getting passive, so that was good to see. I just think too many times from quality positions, he didn't come through on the forehand. Now, of course, if he had a better transition game, if he volleyed better, it would put less stress on the forehand. There wouldn't be quite as much pressure, and it would make the forehand look better instead of sometimes making it look worse, where it's so important that he can finish off of that wing from the back. Now, you can see in these conditions, they help Taylor because when he executes at his best off the ground, he can finish off the ground from any position. Damage comes very easily to him. He's very accurate. He had no trouble against Musetti, who's a great defender, albeit with tired legs. He didn't need to go to the net, right? He could sit back and just finish off the ground against Lorenzo Musetti. And we've seen this matchup, Fritz against Musetti, in certain other circumstances that hasn't been the case. And Fritz has either lost or he's won because he's actually gotten himself to come forward and finish against Lorenzo. But he didn't even need to do it. The conditions are that quick. There are certainly conditions in which Fritz would struggle to finish against Alcaraz. And that's where you really get into an uncomfortable zone of him needing to come forward and finish at the net. But these conditions kind of protect him from ending up in that scenario. And that's why I think this is a really good court for him. That's why it's sort of deflating for Fritz to lose this opportunity, and also very encouraging for Alcaraz for the result to go his way in these conditions. Because if you beat Fritz in these conditions, I think Carlos will feel like I've kind of got him everywhere then. I've kind of got him everywhere. I'd also say the improvements that Alcaraz has made, very important in a match like this, with Fritz trying to sort of hammer anything that he got a decent look at. He played very fast, Fritz. He did a great job of playing fast, using his power, and Carlos has just gotten so much harder to rush because of the technical changes he's made off of both wings. And that's a big improvement you see in matchups like this. If he plays Sinner here, that's going to be the ultimate test of that exact thing. And he's excelled against Sinner in other conditions with that exact thing, becoming harder to rush, particularly after the loss at Wimbledon. I think it's what he worked on. And of course, he excelled at the US Open. This will be even harder to excel. Not saying he can't do it, but it'll be even harder. A couple of shout outs before we move on. Carlos showed why he's the best volleyer on tour in this match. He went 23 out of 26 at the net, and I thought his backhand was extremely threatening. The down the line has been humming in his first two matches, and the drop shot is really cooking. And when you combine those two things, you're looking at a very dangerous backhand, which of course is pretty disconcerting given how scary his forehand is. 29% backhands down the line from Alcaraz compared to an average of 22%. This is something that you see when he plays Taylor Fritz. He believes that the better tactic is to take the backhand down the line often to keep Fritz running into the deuce side hitting forehands. That's where Alcaraz wants him. He prefers the forehand dynamic, deuce side cross court compared to the ad side cross court. All right. Let's talk Musetti de Minaur. Is it better to be nervous or exhausted? That's my question. What is better as a player? This match was a case study in answering that question. Not going to go the same way every time. Every match is different. But as I'm watching this third set, I'm like, all right, Lorenzo Musetti is on tired legs. He is reeling. And Alex de Minaur is tight as a drum. He is feeling this moment. So what's going to give? What's going to happen? And this is not hindsight 2020, because there's a world in which Alex de Minaur held serve to win the third set 6-4. I promise you I would have said the exact same thing, because de Minaur didn't suddenly get tight at 5-4. No. De Minaur was tight the entire third set. And guess what? Musetti was exhausted for the entire second half of the match. Now, there were moments in which he was able to push through better than others. I don't think Musetti wins this match if it's not in Italy, because this took a level of guts, grit, heart that it's not ordinarily accessible for anybody. But given the circumstances, Musetti was basically ready to die on the court, I think. And he didn't have his usual explosiveness, defensively, but he still refused to bail out. He refused to say, all right, I can't defend. He still he tried his best. Even if he had lost some speed and some drive from in the spring and the legs, he was like, I'm just going to work with what I have here and play every point. Max effort. Incredible to watch. And de Minaur was obviously thinking about how he's never won a match at the ATP Finals. And he was 0-4, and he was in the driver's seat to finally get a win on the board. And what you saw throughout, after going up the early break in the third set, the immediate break, his ball speed plummeted. He couldn't attack effectively. He hit some terrible returns off of pedestrian serves, particularly on a couple of, really big break points, where he just allowed Musetti to tee off on a +1 for no reason. Just for no reason other than he's so tight, he couldn't get the return out of the middle or put speed on it. And then, of course, he missed an easy put-away volley for double match point. He had volleyed for most of the match really well, but this was just a shocker where I think the only explanation is that the nerves got to him. In the first set, you might fault de Minaur for playing just a little bit too neutral, but Musetti was on fire. The way he was blending variety and power, and usually the variety is coming from the backhand. He's mixing chip drive 50-50, but even that undersells the variety because sometimes he's chipping short, sometimes he's drop shotting off of that chip setup, sometimes it's going deep, and then when he drives, it's tough to read cross court down the line. Is he going to hit it fast? Is he going to put more loop on the ball? It's just so much is coming off of that backhand. Then the forehand is a lot more straightforward, but Musetti was stellar on the forehand in the first set, averaging around 80 miles per hour, not missing his attacking opportunities. He was playing with a lot of energy. The points were short, good first strike tennis, and he wins the first set. In the second set, de Minaur got way more proactive. There were way more points. I think there was a mindset shift because de Minaur was like, I'm getting outplayed baseline to baseline. Let me try to get forward. Something that de Minaur does really well in general is when it is rare, but in the rare cases in which things are not going well from the baseline, he does a great job at kind of pivoting to a guy who's going to end up at the net a ton. And that's what he did, but I also thought it helped his production off the ground. Just looking to hit bigger, his positioning got more aggressive, looking for avenues to do enough damage to build enough of an advantage where he could come forward. But the big reward here was making Lorenzo defend. There were, I'll say, between 3 and 5 points early in the second set where Musetti was just getting taken coast to coast to coast to coast to coast. And it's like a string of 4 or 5 shots in a row where de Minaur is just moving them. And it's defense, defense, defense for Musetti. It's not about who wins those points. In this case, it was about taking it out of Musetti's legs, stealing his legs. De Minaur successfully did that by getting more offensive in the second set, plus the net finishing was really, really good. And then once that deed was done, de Minaur had some relief from the back because Musetti was making some errors where you could see he wasn't using the ground. And players can still hit very hard without leg drive, but they lose a lot of the margin because they're just, I thought Musetti got, when he lost his legs and he had to still play aggressive, it just got lower RPM, lower margin, couldn't really use the ground to produce his shots like he needs to. There were moments where the off-ball movement wasn't as sharp, so his positioning wasn't as good. And he was struggling to counter-attack. He was still defending, but he just wasn't as explosive on a lot of the balls that he had to run for. And this continued throughout the third set. But when Alex couldn't finish the deal, at 5-4 specifically, but by the way, again, de Minaur had multiple chances throughout the third set to go up a double break. And he just couldn't free himself up in those moments. So Musetti was still around at 5-4. At that point, adrenaline, crowd, finish line in sight, you're gonna push. Like, this is where fatigue kind of goes out the window. And I asked Bradley Klahn, I asked him this question: would you rather be tight or exhausted? And I'm going to just read what he said. He said, I think exhausted provides a measure of freedom that is tough to ignore, frees you up to make instinctual decisions, and can lead to insane tennis, but is harder to overcome. Tightness is annoying in the short run, but you can work your way out of it. This is assuming your exhaustion is a downhill slope and you don't catch a second wind. Here's the thing. And Musetti did catch that second wind. Once you had all of these factors working in his favor, he knew there wasn't much longer to push through. The scoreboard kind of gave him a push. The crowd gave him a push. It was go time, and he was going to be able to empty the tank. And his level was fantastic for these last 4 games. And he got some help. The terrible backhand volley by de Minaur at 30-15. There were a lot of moments, like at 30-all, I thought there was a +1 backhand that de Minaur should have probably hit big and maybe even come in, and he just traded it neutrally. Then eventually, later on in the point, he actually hit an aggressive forehand that missed just wide. But, those were the kind of things. Second set, no nerves. You know that de Minaur is going to react to that ball differently. Break point, 5-4, 30-40. Maybe this is the backhand that I'm thinking about. He massaged it down the middle. He should have attacked it. He didn't. Musetti hit a deep trade. De Minaur hit a backhand off the short hop that just had no speed to it whatsoever. Absolute sitting duck. And Musetti unloaded for an 107-mile-per-hour forehand inside out. 5-6, de Minaur looking for the tie break. He went up 30-15 in this game. 30 all. Another midcourt backhand. Low contact point. Not the most comfortable shot for de Minaur, I will admit, off of a chipped ball. A chipped return by Musetti. But bad midcourt miss on a backhand approach shot. Did save the first match point with an effective body serve. But then Musetti was really good on the next couple points. And on the match point, it was incredible. Unbelievable forehand pass. Musetti, the shot making on the run is just remarkable. And this was a total epic. It was a magical match to watch. Not because it's like, oh, these guys are playing so perfect. No, not really. Although they played some great tennis, that's not really why it was so magical to watch. It was magical to watch because they were both dealing with human things, nerves and fatigue. And Musetti's willpower ended up winning out because he could fight through it better. On some of these big points, though, de Minaur just has to find a way to attack a little bit better. All right, for the remainder of this, and I know this has gotten pretty long, for the remainder of this, I'm going to go a lot faster for the rest of our matches, which none of them have been as compelling as the two that I just talked about. Sinner beat Felix Auger-Aliassime. The main concern is actually Felix's health because at 5-6 in the first set, he grabbed at his calf and did not really move well for the rest of the match. So that made things pretty simple. I actually thought Sinner was pretty far off of his regular level. I think he was like on his C game against Felix for the most part. He still found himself even at the end of the first set. And then the second set just wasn't much of a competition because he had a diminished Felix. But it was amazing to see Sinner execute the rally strategy that worked so well against FAA. And I did talk about it in Paris, where he did something similar. But, the game plan is to trade/rally into Felix's backhand. He does it so much better than an ordinary player could because he brings more ball speed and he hits that outer backhand third so often. Felix is just having to hit way more backhands than normal. In this match, 55% of Sinner's rally balls hit the backhand third of Felix. Not the backhand half. That's a little bit easier because then you can put a ball in the middle and you still get credit. No, backhand third, 55%. Compare that only 23% into the forehand third. 20 balls went there total, and 10 of them were winners. So essentially, when Sinner is going into the deuce side, he's doing it assuming that Felix is basically not going to touch the ball. This is a kill shot. This is, I'm either making Felix desperately defend or I'm hitting a winner. That's when I go into his forehand. Other than that, nope, no thanks. Backhands for days. It doesn't sound like this brilliant thing because it's not. But the execution of it is just at a really, really high level. It was the same thing in Paris, but he couldn't do it quite as well, probably because Felix was able to bring a little bit more quality on his side of the net. But in that one, Sinner was 46% into the ad third versus 24% into the deuce third. But once again, 12 out of the 17 winners that Sinner hit off the ground in Paris were into the deuce third. So low volume, high efficiency for Jannik Sinner. That's the plan against Felix, but it wasn't much of a match. And I think Jannik will feel as if, he didn't play great and it was kind of just his opponent faltered physically, unfortunately. I hope Felix is okay for his next two matches because I really think he has a good chance, if he's healthy, to get through to the semis, as I communicated in my preview. Zverev taking out Ben Shelton. This one went pretty much as you'd expect. Zverev's remarkable record against left-handers continues. He is 36-1 in his last 37 matches against lefties. And that comes down to, of course, the quality of his backhand, including his backhand return. But in this one, it was actually, in a lot of ways, the forehand disparity that seemed like a bigger deal because Ben just didn't really get the balance right, in my view, between aggression and risk. And to me, it was just too much towards risk. He made only 74% of his forehands. Zverev made 86%. I don't expect those numbers to be all that close in this matchup, but for Shelton, it's got to be better than that. It's got to be better than 74. It's okay for Ben to make more errors, but that's too many, especially if you look at some of the moments that they came in. If you look at the 3 set points for Shelton at the end of the second set. So yes, this was competitive in the sense it could have gone 3. I'm going to take you through all 3 set points. The first was a serve and volley on a second serve into Zverev's backhand. You guys know how I feel about serve and volleys on the second serve. I don't like them. But at the very least, Ben was really struggling to win second serve points throughout the match. So I can give it a pass. I can give the decision a pass. But still, you're hitting a second serve to Zverev's backhand and coming in behind it. Like, I don't think that's great math. And then on the next 2 points, Shelton missed attacking forehands. Missed him pretty badly in the net. And this is kind of something that I've been highlighting with Ben. It's very easy to pick on Shelton's backhand because it's the weaker wing. But I feel as if the forehand side of Shelton, his strength, there is a lot of room for improvement there because I just don't think it's reliable enough considering it's something that needs to be a strength. It needs to be the reason he wins matches. And I still feel like Shelton's forehand is sub-elite because he misses it too much, especially behind a serve that sets up so many opportunities. Again, so much Shelton analysis is effective serve, missed a forehand behind it. So much of like Shelton's bad moments end up looking like that. Zverev's serve was really good in this match as well. That didn't help matters for Shelton. He served 81% first serves in, 128 miles per hour. As many people know, this is not super atypical for Zverev, although he's normally around 70% as opposed to 80%. Sasha is somebody who can bring those numbers to the table, and Shelton being somebody who has an only average return, if that, is probably going to struggle, and he did. 52% total serves unreturned. So Zverev he got plenty of freebies, and he was able to lean on his discipline and his large consistency advantage to beat Ben Shelton. I think I'm going to cut it off there with deep match analysis. Again, Fritz was super sharp, showing his class against Musetti, who is very clearly coming into this ATP Finals tired. And I think it's a great effort for Lorenzo. I think he'll go home happy no matter what, just to get one win at this point. Not going to be easy, especially against Carlos after another physical affair. Man, you just have to feel like Alcaraz is in the driver's seat now to go 3-0 and lock up year-end number 1, given that. I did not see much of Alcaraz versus de Minaur to start on Sunday. Did not see much of that match, so I don't have anything to say there. I'll end on this. This is the first time I am doing any content since the whole shakeup went down with Djokovic announcing that he's not playing, which I'm pretty sure he told Lorenzo at the net. It was pretty clear that he did, so I don't think I'm going on a limb there. I think it was pretty clear Djokovic told Lorenzo at the net, which means at some point he made that decision. And this was a complicated situation. Like, first of all, I think there's something going on with Djokovic's shoulder. So that's item number one. And I think that's been going on for a bit. I would say like he didn't serve okay in Athens. He served great in Athens. And actually just like overall, I couldn't see any evidence that the shoulder is an issue. But still, in general, he's had that taped. He's been dealing with that thing. So that is the official reason. That is the official reason why Djokovic is not playing the ATP Finals. It is because of a shoulder. Now, on top of that, while I was watching the final against Musetti and just how difficult that was for Novak physically, I mean, he wouldn't have had much of a chance to turn around the next week and play the ATP Finals. I'm changing my tune on this because my opinion was that he should play the ATP Finals because it wouldn't be that taxing physically. But after watching how Athens went down, it would have been either or, not both. Because I don't think Djokovic would have fared well physically. The third thing is that Novak does not want to hurt his family's event. And maybe he did decide pre-semifinals that he wasn't going to play in Turin. Maybe that decision in his head was made in the middle of the weeks at some point. But had he announced it, Musetti might, I don't know. I don't know if Musetti would have gone through and played Athens. Like, he may have pulled out of the event, just made up an injury. That may have been part of Novak's consideration because his family owns the tournament. So that made things complicated. There is also the Italy angle. Now, when I was up in arms earlier this year about why Djokovic isn't playing Rome, and I could not really figure out like what's the logic behind this decision. And then of course Novak was asked in press, and his answer, it was an answer, but it didn't fully satisfy. Like, it still left questions of why he didn't play Rome. It certainly was not a definitive answer. And some of his fans at that point were like, Gill, he does not want to play in Italy. After the water bottle incident in Rome last year, and maybe some arguments with ATP Brass, he doesn't want to play in Italy. And I'll be completely honest, I thought that was like an insane take. I'm just like, what? He doesn't want to play? Or maybe feeling as if the crowd is hostile or whatever. I thought, no way. At this point, you know, he skipped Rome and he skipped Turin twice. If Djokovic like doesn't step foot in Italy again for the rest of his career, at that point, I will be thinking like, maybe he doesn't want to play in Italy. Maybe he does. I don't know. I'm not saying I'm now a believer in that, but the more times he pulls out of every big event in Italy, like the more solid that is going to seem. Did he tell Felix and not Lorenzo that he wasn't going to play Turin? I don't think so. I don't believe in that conspiracy theory. Felix says that his knee hurt throughout Paris. And given his track record, I believe him. His track record as somebody with terrible knees. I believe him. But I guess we'll never know. The one thing, and I'll finish on this, I am glad that next year the ATP will end the race after Paris. I know I was talking with Brad Gilbert on Monday Match Analysis, and I was thinking they should end the race after Paris. I don't know if the decision came down before that and I just hadn't seen it. In fact, I think that is indeed the case. I just hadn't seen it. The ATP was one step ahead of me because they've already made that change. There will still be 250s the week after the Paris Masters, but they won't count towards ATP Finals qualification. So good rule change. We won't have this mess ever again. So cheers to that, I guess. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.